Hello students, good evening all. Trust you all are doing great. So welcome back to the live streaming of the daily news analysis sessions. I'm your educator Prithviraj Singh and we'll be understanding the important news articles of 10th of May 2022. Well, the government is reconsidering its sedition law. You all know about the Sedition Act, the act which was being passed by the colonial authorities, right? And it was being included into the Indian Penal Code. Any word or any written statement, any writing or any word that actually creates hatred against the government, which results into hatred against the government, or which disturbs the public peace, or it results into public disorder, such acts are being called as sedition. Now, sedition is being mentioned under section 124A of Indian Penal Code, IPC 1860. It happened, guys, that in the year 1873, there was a famous British officer, Lord Macaulay. Now, he actually proposed the Sedition Act to curb the activities which result into the hatred against the government. Lord Macaulay, right? So those people who are being charged under section 124A are being imprisoned for 3 years, plus there would be fine, right? And all those punishments are mentioned in Indian Penal Code, IPC section 124A, right? Now the government is reviewing this act because there have been many abuses of this act by the government, right? Because the intention behind this act was to actually reduce or alleviate the public disorder or any hatred against the government, right? But then it also results into misuse of this act by the government, thereby curbing the freedom of speech and expression, right? We all know that Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A talks about freedom of speech and expression, right? The right to freedom of speech and expression is mentioned under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. Definitely there are restrictions of national integrity, sovereignty, public order, morality. That means your speech must not result into public disturbance. It must not be a threat to the national integrity or national sovereignty. So all those limitations are there. But I mean, section 124A is very vague. I mean, government can impose restriction on the fundamental right under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A, and it would be detrimental to the freedom of speech and expression. And government, because even if you have any dissent, if you're not happy with any policy of the government and you want to address your grievance, so even if you're dissenting against the government, that would also be checked under section 124A, right, which is sedition law. Now the government is re-examining and reconsidering the sedition law, and as I say, that it is a colonial baggage because it's being borrowed, it's being carried on from the IPC 1860, right? So it is definitely anarchic law, it's a colonial law, and there are concerns over civil liberties and human rights. Now there was an article a few days back where we had a DNA session over the same. So the only judgment which talks about the sedition law is Kedarnath judgment, or Kedarnath versus State of Bihar. So it is very important, students. ये हमेशा आप ध्यान में रखिए, सेडिशन को लेके आपको पता होना चाहिए कौन सा जो है सेक्शन है आईपीसी का. सो 124A आईपीसी, करेक्ट. What is the definition of sedition? Number 2. Number 3, what is the Supreme Court, name of the Supreme Court case which talks about the sedition law? So it is Kedarnath case versus State of Bihar in the year 1962, right? So it's been almost 60 years have passed, and in Kedarnath versus State of Bihar, Supreme Court upheld the validity of section 124A. Means section 124A सही है, but it actually limited the use of section 124A in the sense that the government would be in the position to apply section 124A only for activities which involve incitement to violence. मतलब ऐसी कोई activity which is actually resulting into violence या disturbance of the public order, public disturbances. And third condition is disturbance of the public peace, right? So if your activity either by words or in writing incites violence, right? अगर वो violence को incite कर रहा है. Number 2, if it is resulting into public disturbance. Number 3, if it is disturbing the public peace. Only in these 3 conditions the government can use section 124A, correct? Now, but then you all know that there is huge difference between the letter and the spirit, right? There is huge difference gap between what is being stated in the law and the ground reality, right? So therefore, many cases we have seen that the government has misused the sedition law in order to curb the dissenters. In order to curb the dissenters, the government has used the section 124A, right? So in Kedarnath versus state of Bihar, the sedition law was being upheld. Upheld means उसके legality को valid बोला गया था, plus limitations जरूर लगा दिए थे, right? Now on the other hand, K.K. Venugopal, who is the present Attorney General of the Government of India, the highest law officer of the country, says that the Kedarnath judgment is the last word on the issue of sedition, and it has balanced well the right of freedom of speech and expression and the security of state. Means he is actually satisfied with Kedarnath case, and he is in fact saying that the Kedarnath case has balanced between the right of freedom of speech and expression and the security of the state, right? So it has taken care of the security of the state, at the same time the freedom of speech and expression, right? Whereas the opposition member and now also a Supreme Court lawyer, Kapil Sibal, he says that section 124A is per se unconstitutional and it cannot be used to silence dissent, because if any time, every time you speak anything against the government, you would be booked under section 124A. In this sense, there is no point of having freedom of speech and expression. There is no use of having liberties, right? Now, in this way, the article also talked about the misuse of the sedition law, which should be controlled, and it had to be examined, right, in the light of section 19, article 19 and article 21, right? Now, so this is how the Kedarnath case, the Supreme Court discussed the things, as I just mentioned, and as I was explaining that it was Thomas Babington Macaulay in 1837 who said that whoever by words, either spoken or written, or even by signs, that means even if you are drawing some caricature, some cartoon, which is derogatory, which results into incitement of violence and hatred against the government, by visible representation. You may be remembering, the students, there was a cartoonist a few years back, Asim Trivedi. He actually drew a painting of a man urinating on parliament, right? So it was definitely a cartoon, but then he was being booked under the sedition law and he was being imprisoned, right? Although he when he set free, when he got out from the prison, he was being called by the big boss because he did became a celebrity, and the story goes on like that. So anyways, so even if you are drawing some cartoon or caricature, so in this sense, the signs or by visible representation, bringing or attempting to bring into hatred or contempt or exciting or attempt to excite dissatisfaction towards the government established by law in India. तो ये sedition का उस समय ऐसा law था, as proposed by Macaulay in 1837, and then it was being brought in the criminal code, the IPC of 1860. Now it is, you must understand that it is non-bailable offence. मतलब इसके ऊपर bail नहीं मिल सकती, until unless the judge on his own discretion decides. but you cannot be granted bail. So it is a non-bailable offense, number one. Number two, the punishment is from 3 years to life along with a fine, right? So this is also a provision of the section 124A. Plus you must also understand that even the passport is being seized by the government, right, of such people. And many countries, even UK, where it originated actually, they have abolished it in the year 2010, right? So even the advanced countries have actually abolished it. The originator of the sedition law, UK, has already abolished it, correct? Now many political leaders in India, even before independence, were being booked under the sedition charges, like Gandhi, Nehru, so on and so forth. So there is a now need to strike a balance between sedition and the right to freedom of speech and expression, and installing safeguards against misuse of the sedition charges, right? And it should be scrutinized whether the word sedition could be substituted suitably with another, right? So in this sense, section 124A IPC says the same thing as I discussed in the previous slide. I hope it is clear now, right? So we are clear with the facts which are mentioned in this article. Very important, and expect a question in the exam. Moving to the next news article, Operation Dodi. Now Operation Dodi, as you can see on the screen, was a very famous operation almost 30 years back, right? In the year 1991, there were insurgency, rise in insurgency in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, right? In order to curb that insurgency, Assam Rifles conducted this clandestine operation called as by the code name Operation Dodi, and it happened in the Kashmir region where there were Pakistani trained extremists which were being they had some plan to actually infiltrate India, but then in the clashes they were being killed, and 13 were being captured at around 14,000 feet in Jammu Kashmir by the brave soldiers of Assam Rifles, right? And the government has decided to felicitate Samman Samaroh, right? Felicitate the surviving soldiers of Operation Dodi. जो soldiers अभी तक जिंदा है उनको सम्मान होगा, right? They would be felicitated under which were the part of the Operation Dodi, and this is India's most successful counter-insurgency operation, which happened more than 30 years ago. अभी तक का सबसे successful counter-insurgency कोई operation है तो वो Operation Dodi है, right? So Operation Dodi, I have also hereby depicted in a picture. As you can see, these were the routes of infiltration. Kishan Ganga river, which is a tributary of Jhelum. Then from Jhelum river they entered into the territory of, right, and then from here they were entering, right, the green arrows. Now these were the places in red blasts where the major encounters took place, and it was a successful operation by the Assam Rifles, right? So Operation Dodi. Now moving to the next news article, Panthanal Wetland. Now Panthanal Wetland has been recently making the news, and because of the pollution levels being increased there. Panthanal Wetland, students, is a wetland site in Southern America over the Paraguay River and its tributaries. It is in fact the world's largest wetland site. So this is an important fact that you have to keep in mind, that Panthanal Wetland is the world's largest wetland site, and it is there in South America, and it is at the risk of collapse because of the environmental pollution. And there are series of mining activities which are actually going on nearby Panthanal Wetland. It is also world's largest flooded grasslands, right? So these are the two important facts about Panthanal Wetland. World's largest wetland, world's largest flooded grasslands, and they are located at the Paraguay River and its tributaries. As you can see in the pictorial representation, the Panthanal Wetland in Southern America over Paraguay River and its tributaries, world's largest wetland. So wetland is a place which is marshy and which has, almost 8 months it is being, there is water. Out of 12 months, 8 months they are in water. There is a marshy situation there, right? So you can see the pictorial representation of Panthanal Wetland in Southern America. To the next news article. You all know about the economic crisis which is turning into, it is turning volatile. It is actually, have taken a violent turn. Sri Lankan economic crisis, where the balance of payments have been dipped to unexpected levels. The foreign exchange reserves have also dipped to just $2 billion. Students, it is something which is very, very low. If I talk about the foreign exchange reserves, they are just $2 billion of Sri Lanka. When I compare it with India, India's forex reserves are $670 billion. So now you see now you compare for yourself. $670 billion, the foreign exchange reserves of India, and the foreign exchange reserve for Sri Lanka is just $2 billion. So there is no comparison at all, right? And forex reserves are being used when you are importing any commodity in your country. Let's say you are importing crude oil. You pay in dollars, right? And you will pay only with your reserves. And these reserves are called as foreign exchange reserves, right? Because when you are importing crude oil, you pay in dollars, correct? So therefore, you have to make use of the foreign exchange reserves. अब इतने कम foreign exchange reserves के अंदर you cannot import anything, right? और वहाँ पे crude oil import नहीं हो रहा है. There is a huge scarcity and dearth of the essential commodities. People are standing in long queues to actually get their rations. और मिल नहीं रहा है वहाँ पे. People are actually dying standing in the queues. वहाँ पे violent activities हो रही है. Even the government के जो anti government protesters थे, उन्होंने they fired many places. The clashes are taking place, and because it is a family run system, it's a family run government, right? All the Rajapaksa brothers, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who is the president, Mahinda Rajapaksa, who is the prime minister, then Basil, who is the finance minister, and many other important portfolios are being occupied by the Rajapaksa family, right? So it's a family run government and it has completely collapsed. A few days back, we have also learned that the national emergency was being imposed on Sri Lanka, and it was the second time. But then people are not stopping, anti-government protesters are not stopping, and there are violent clashes between the anti-government protesters and the government supporters, right? And many people have died, and because of this reason, Sri Lankan Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has resigned. Very important news of today. Hindu, the very front page. Sri Lankan Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has now resigned from his office, and in this way the cabinet stands to be dissolved as per the Sri Lankan constitution. Correct. Now the official residence of the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka is called as Temple Trees. Temple Trees. तो ये यहाँ पे important takeaways है. Although you can always watch my previous DNA sessions for the Sri Lankan economic crisis. Now moving to the next news article, you all would be knowing that Indian Prime Minister was on a European tour where he visited 3 important countries, that is Germany, then France and Denmark. In Denmark, he also attended a summit of the Nordic countries, also called a Second Indo-Nordic Summit, and in France he had a high-level meeting with the newly elected, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, and in Germany also he met the chancellor, right? And so in this sense, it is a very important visit of the Indian Prime Minister, because India is still supporting, in fact, because India has abstained from voting in the United Nations General Assembly voting on the resolution against Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? So it has been 3 times that India has abstained from voting. We all know that India is dependent on the arms imports from Russia, and there are around 70% of arm imports coming from the Russian Federation, right, in India. Plus, at the same time, India is also dependent on the crude oil from Russia, correct? So that is the reason why, and these are the geopolitical reasons why India has not yet taken its stand, and but then it is also being, something which is being which is also being said by America. America is unhappy because of India's stand, as you all know. So this meeting is very important. Even Germany has close links with Russia, I mean economic links with Russia. You all know about the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. It connects Russian natural gas reserves with Germany. Germany is the major client of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, right? So even Germany is actually exploring some other means of natural gas, So they have continued to engage with Moscow to increase the import of cheap crude oil, right? Because India is still importing crude oil from Russia, and its long-standing and traditional defense links with Russia remains intact. Guys, even New Delhi needs to manage a delicate balance. This is a suggestion of the author, that Delhi has to manage a delicate balancing act while asserting its right to pursue its national interests and strategic autonomy. At the same time, its significant reliance on Russian gas and crude is also important, because Germany is also dependent on Russia, and we have discussed that India has abstained in all the United Nations votes against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and India's role as a major power and largest democracy are being brought to the forefront, right? Because India is the largest democracy, it's an emerging power, and it has been brought to forefront. Even guys, the German Chancellor Scholz has visited Japan in the past few days. So and the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida has also come to India, right? So they are also all talking about the India's role in the in the Ukraine crisis. So it is the first term of the German Chancellor Scholz, Olaf Scholz, as you all know. And although we did sign an agreement with Germany, right, in the year 2000, and it was something by the name strategic partnership. So this is a time where we must actually strengthen our strategic partnership, which we signed in the year 2000. And even Germany is exploring its avenues in Indo-Pacific, correct? Because in order to counter China, India also has to take side of America, right? And has to do a geopolitical balancing, because China can be balanced only when you have support of some of the Western powers like China and UK, like America and UK, right? So therefore, at the same time, Germany is also lessening its dependency on Russian Federation over the natural gas imports, and in fact they are also exploring the areas where they can build the mutual relations between the Asian powers and can bring the outcomes of the Indo-Pacific guidelines, correct? Now in the same way, the Indian policies have resisted promoting democracy in the neighborhood, because it's not that India has been the ambassador of democracy. There are many countries in our neighborhood, like Pakistan, like Myanmar. We have seen the military rule there. Myanmar mein to abhi bhi military rule hi hai, जनता rule, right? It's a military dictatorship, and India is not actually doing anything to support or promote democracy, right? तो ऐसा नहीं है कि that is the only reason why India should have good relations with the European countries which actually support democracy, because India has itself not actually promoted democracy in any of its neighborhood countries, right? But the only common link which I see is the Ukraine crisis, right? So India has to take its stand and walk the road very cautiously. So even India is reluctant to do business with Taliban, right? So जो de facto powers होते हैं उनके साथ इंडिया एक्ट करता है, ऐसा ऑथर बोल रहा है, and it doesn't do on itself to promote the democracy. So far it has not revised its position on Russia and Ukraine by continue to underline its unequal condemnation of the violence. ठीक है, तो India is actually condemning the violence and saying that शांति बनाए रखो, but उसके अलावा कोई पोजीशन रशिया के ऊपर इंडिया की अभी तक नहीं है. Now very importantly guys, Germany has invited Mr. Modi to actually attend G7 meeting. You all know guys that Group 7 or G7 is a group of industrialized nations, right, of which even Russia was part of it. 2014, but in 2014 after the Crimean annexation, when the southern peninsula of Ukraine was being annexed by Russian Federation in the year 2014, many sanctions were being imposed on Russia and it was being expelled from G8. So G8 got transformed into G7, right? And G7 is a group of all the industrialized nations. Can you tell me in the comment box which all countries are the members of G7? So give your answers in the comment box. So Germany has invited Mr. Modi to attend the G7 meeting in June this year. Okay. So June this year the meeting is to be scheduled, constituted as a bid to wean India away from its position on Russia. तो ये एक इस तरीके से this meeting as the European powers feel कि India would take its stand at least in this meeting, and so your answers are coming. Yeah, so first is United States of America, second is Canada, third is UK, fourth is France, fifth is Germany, sixth is Italy, seventh is Japan, right? So this is a group of all the industrialized nations, G7, US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, Italy and Japan. Surprisingly and strangely, China is not there. Russia was there prior to 2014, but Crimean annexation के बाद, when it annexed Crimean Peninsula, it was being removed or expelled from G8. Right? So India को invite किया है G7 के अंदर, and give your answer in the comment box कि G7 meeting 2022 के अंदर कहाँ होने वाली है, right? So I expect an answer from you guys in the comment box. You give me the answer. G7 2022 will be held at what place, right? So with this important article, I end this in today's session. I hope the session was interesting. Press the like button for the regular updates. Press the bell icon. Do share, like and comment. Wish you all the best. God bless you. Bye.